I'd like to take a moment to thank the Blockchain Academy. The Blockchain Academy is an educational training firm offering blockchain training to the enterprise. The Blockchain Academy offers courses for both management and developers, offering delivery online and in live classrooms. The Blockchain Academy works with enterprise clients to create and deliver innovative training programs globally. They recently announced a new blockchain course targeted towards attorneys. To learn more about the Blockchain Academy, visit them at www.theblockchainacademy.com.
This is the Blockchain 360 podcast. Blockchain 360 is a podcast of interviews and discussions about the current state and direction of blockchain. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time listening, then thank you for coming. The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at our website, blockchain360.co. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at Blockchain360. All links discussed today are included in the show notes.
My name is Brian Nielsen, and I'm your host here on Blockchain 360, where we talk about everything blockchain. Today's guest is Heather Montgomery, and she is the Chief Revenue Officer of 420 Blockchain. She is responsible for the company's monetization streams, including blockchain partnership revenues, data revenue, and mobile marketing sales. She leads a coordinated approach to revenue generation across multiple platforms with the goal to maximize growth in the rapidly changing cannabis industry. Heather, welcome to Blockchain 360.
Thank you, Brian.
So what brought you to blockchain, or even more importantly, what brought you to the cannabis industry?
Yes, that's by way of a very interesting route, actually. My oldest son has suffered from grand mal seizures for 5 years and unfortunately had failed 5 different medications over that period of time. And when you fail continued drug therapies, they believe that you have about a 5% chance of ever having any drug work for seizure control.
So the seizure control medications that they put him on only had a 5% success rate.
Because he failed more than 4,
wow.
The likelihood of any of them working was going to be less than 5%.
Wow.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of very negative side effects to these particular families of drugs: suicidal tendencies, lethargy, depression, weight gain, weight loss. I mean, it just goes on and on. And he was, a young teenager going through high school and all the normal angst that you would go through during that time period.
When did this onset?
13. At 13 years old, out of nowhere, just had a seizure. And, I, of course, knew there was no drugs involved, but of course they had to do all the tests. The hospital said, great test, just to be sure. But it was just a very strange and severe seizure. So we kind of hoped, like everyone, that after one seizure would just maybe be situational, one and done type of thing. Right. Until the second seizure came in, and that's when the neurologists start to really get involved, and they want to put them on a drug, of course, to try to control the seizures. And in Stephen's case, it was a little unique because he would only have a seizure once every 3 to 5 weeks. But then when he would have one, they were full grand mal seizures with no warning. So if he was standing, fall face first. He had at one point broken his jaw from walking into Walmart with me. We were walking one minute and I'm right by my side. The next minute he's on the ground bleeding everywhere. So it's a very, unfortunately, it's a very difficult disorder to have to deal with as a parent or as, the person that has the disease. So we, of course, were looking into many different alternatives since it seemed that none of the traditional medical drugs were working on his particular case, and obviously spent lots of time and energy trying to identify the cause of the seizure disorder. But unfortunately, in more than 50% of seizures, they just really have no idea what's triggering or what's causing the issue. And many of the drugs that they do prescribe, they don't even know the mechanism of action. I mean, it has something to do with the calcium channels and the way the neurons are firing in the brain, and essentially they're just slowing down synapses and electrical currents, if you will. And that's what they're hoping will keep the seizures.
Right, a
Suppressor. And so there had been a lot of news. Sanjay Gupta did his
Sure.
special on CBD oils and, in intractable seizures, which young children are having hundreds of seizures a day.
Wow.
It's been highly effective. And then we had the Charlotte's Web, special where people were learning how and moving to California or Colorado in order to be able to give their children these particular oils and whatnot. So we started researching it and looking into it, and we have been going to the Mayo Clinic and a lot of the best hospitals, Miami Children's Hospital, South Carolina and Charleston, the medical university there. We had all the studies, all the 5-day sleep studies, all the heavy MRIs and 3D MRIs and brain mapping. I mean, if you name full genomic sequencing for myself, my son, and my ex-husband, just to try to figure out what was going on. And when I asked the doctor about CBD oil or about medical marijuana, and this was a doctor that had been treating seizures for probably 25 to 30 years, came highly recommended. He said, well, there's just not enough research, and we don't know if it's safe, and we can't get involved in prescribing or recommending that. And unfortunately, in the medical community, they also can't, even though they know there's less than a 5% of any of the drugs working, they can't tell you to take your children off drugs or it's malpractice.
Right.
So you're stuck in this cycle of trying another drug and another drug and another side effect and another drug or a combination of drug therapies and still having all of the same issues. So we had to kind of go off grid and find some more natural health doctors that were doing clinical research at the University of San Diego on brain tumors. I mean, they were having extraordinary results, which was not what my son had, did not have brain tumors.
Right.
But he was very educated in dosing and what would be an efficacious dose and how to titrate, which means bring up or bring down an amount of a therapeutic agent, if you will. So we did go in and order the CBD oil, which had 0 THC in it, which was legal in all 50 states. And but it doesn't taste very good. It's an oil that tastes like an herb.
Right.
So, many herbs don't taste very, very good. Ginseng, some of the others. So compliance with a 16-year-old for massive amounts of yucky tasting oil every day wasn't really all that great.
Was it helpful?
In Stephen's case, I'm not quite sure if he really fully complied with the right doses, and he wasn't super happy. At this point, he had kind of felt like a guinea pig for 4 years, going to doctor after doctor
Right.
and test after test and drug after drug, and let's not eat these foods and let's cut out sugar and maybe we should not eat any. He was just kind of over it, unfortunately, at that
Right.
point. So I'm not sure that he really complied. And being 17, it was kind of difficult to pour the oil, down his throat every day and make him do it. So I wouldn't want to say one way or another if we really had the right attempt and full utilization of that, and which is part of the reason why I got involved, is because, there's other ways to administer CBD oil or, cannabidiol and pill form and vape pens. And if the research were there and we could say, hey, this is what you need to do for seizures in a way that a 17-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or even a 30-year-old
Right.
would be willing to comply, I think that could make a big difference.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I found interesting was your background. So can you talk to us about what you used to do prior to
Sure.
this position at 420 Blockchain?
Sure. My grandmother actually died of cancer when I was a young girl, which started me on a path to researching natural health. And for many years, I worked helping primary care doctors and cardiologists and some of the natural medicine physicians integrate natural therapies into practice in a manner that would support improving health conditions at the same time enhancing practice revenues. Because the problem with the medical environment in these days is they'd like to bring in some more cutting edge testing or advanced clinical therapies in stem cell or genomics
Sure.
or, even very high grade nutraceuticals, if you will, like omega-3 fish oils
Right.
and vitamin Ds and all of those things, but they take a lot of time to explain to a patient. And that's the one thing a doctor does not have the time to do. They have to see 30 patients a day or they can't keep their doors open anymore. The physicians used to be making $500,000. It was
Right.
very prestigious and very financially advantageous to be a physician many years ago. But through changes in healthcare coverage, through insurance reimbursement changes, economy changes, physicians have
Medical malpractice
medical
insurance.
malpractice, all of the above. I mean, they
Right.
have so many different, and let's not forget, they're supposed to be doctors and healers, not advanced business people, right? This is another problem in the medical community is we want them to be doctors and focus on our health and our wellness, but then they have to be these stellar business people in order to maintain their doors open and
Right.
profitable. And that's a very difficult thing to do is be super good at
Both.
both.
Right.
So we looked at how to bring in revenue streams that were in compliance with the laws that didn't violate Stark or anti-kickback. And I mean, it's a very complicated landscape. And so we became consultants. My company switched from working directly with the physicians to working with the advanced testing companies and the advanced nutraceutical type or therapy companies, because they all face the same problem of how do we educate our doctors and support their patient education needs in a manner that will actually get them to utilize these really great therapies that we
Sure.
have out there. And so we would come in and help them kind of streamline the integration process and help train staff other than the physician to provide some of those educational services. And we eventually I built an online platform called imedicaltraining.com, which had 80 different segments of training in all different areas of natural health, whether it was weight loss or nutraceuticals or advanced lipid profile testing. And
Did you have anything on cannabis?
we did not have anything on cannabis at that time. That was
Mm.
about 5 years ago. Excuse me. That was about 5 years ago. And it was actually even prior to my son having his seizure disorders. So, but it was interesting to really learn how controlled our medical community is by pharmaceuticals, by insurance reimbursements, and by fear of being sued.
Right.
Because doctors have to follow certain protocols
Right.
or they have their license in jeopardy. And so you would think integrating natural therapies would be easy, but it really wasn't. And so we saw that as, the number one prescribed health action, if you will, or with many of these age-related degenerative diseases is to lose weight. Right? That's lifestyle modification is like the number one prescription for
Sure.
all doctors. But none of them have a way to help the patient do that, not meaningfully. And we go out in this weight loss world with the pills and the gadgets and it's a billion-dollar industry for a reason. Multi-billion-dollar, but there really isn't any real true health guidance that the physician was able to offer because of the labor-intensive nature and because the science is always changing. So we saw, getting to the cause as more important than just treating the symptom. And getting to the cause requires sometimes as patients taking accountability and changing our actions,
Right.
which is another whole slew of problems. But that's what I used to do, and so cannabis fits very nicely into that same family of
Alternatives.
of education and experience. We do have a lot of areas of the country that are legalizing marijuana recreationally, but most of the states started with medical use.
Right.
That's what was approved to be legal. And although I'm very happy that we have started to approve marijuana and cannabis for medical purposes, the way the current environment works is the doctor gives you a prescription because you have anxiety or you have a headache or you have pain, which is great because we need to get people off the opiates and onto something that's a little less damaging.
Right.
But the problem is you give me the prescription and I go into a dispensary and I buy whatever I want. It's not like, here, take a certain amount of this for that. So there's lack of actual medical application, in my opinion. Here's the strain you need. There's two
There's no
main.
guidance
There's
given.
no guide, and the doctors don't have the education, in fairness, so it would be difficult to require that. So there's a whole bunch of need around this industry, and it starts.
That's actually a false statement you made. And the reason why is they have to learn all about the pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
So to say that they can't learn about the various strains of medical marijuana,
Oh, they surely can.
they can.
They
and
don't have it yet.
Right.
And the education isn't there yet. That's why I say they can't.
Right.
Right now, there isn't the database that says, here's the strains for this, and here's the strains for that, and here's how much you dose, and here's how you have to worry about the other medications that they're taking.
Sure.
Because any natural, a lot of what people don't understand is a lot of pharmacology stems from natural products. And then they modify it a little or they add a synthetic to it, and now they can patent it and call it a drug. Well, there's a lot of interactions between drugs and natural therapies. So if you're giving somebody something like pycnogenol, which lowers blood pressure, and they're on blood pressure medicine, you have to watch that blood pressure medicine.
Right.
You have to titrate that dose down when you bring in the natural alternative as a adjunct therapy. So what I mean by they can't, and you're right, they can, they certainly can, is that the information that they need to do that hasn't been properly collected and researched and assimilated and put into programs. And the other thing is the medical schools are funded by pharmaceutical companies. They have been for many, many years. So the curriculum is, most doctors will tell you they had less than 8 hours of nutritional training in 8 years of school, 4 years of medical school. I mean, they laugh about it. When I used to go in and teach them about, integrating these therapies,
Sure.
I'm like, well, let me guess, you guys had like about 8 to 16 hours of nutritional training. They all look at each other and laugh. They go, if that,
Right.
there just isn't the curriculum unless you go to a natural health school.
Right.
And then you're going to get that education. So you're right. They do, and they will learn, I think, and they do need to learn. But that's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about blockchain and creating a network of united cannabis suppliers, providers, researchers that can take all that data and aggregate it into a database that has the ability to then take analytics and take, you're very familiar with some of the technologies like IBM Watson and utilize this smart AI machine learning to actually take out the important information that we need and share it amongst the population.
Right. So how did you become interested in blockchain?
I actually was working in.
I mean, you go from, alternative health, supplements
Vitamin
and everything,
C to blockchain.
and then you have this issue with your son, and you're trying to find a solution, and that leads you to some cannabis. But where's the leap?
Ironically, the leading to the cannabis and the finding of the blockchain were totally unrelated. And happened a year apart from each other. So because my son had broken his jaw, I took him out of school. He was homeschooling, and I was at home 24/7. So I had to stop doing what I was doing and really change my lifestyle and find a way to work from home
Sure.
to be able to monitor him. And I'm a single mom, so there was no one else. And I wouldn't want to just trust that with anybody else. So for a year, I worked from home, and I did some consulting, which led me to a climb to Mount Kilimanjaro, where I met someone who I ended up doing some business with as a partner. And we were working on a client's digital platform and database and a whole new way to drive media, a very high profile celebrity. Like, I'm not going to say
Okay.
who. And so I was actually introduced to a company in Boca Raton called Augusta High Tech. And we came there and told them what we were wanting to create and what the client was trying to accomplish, and we started building this technology platform. And one day while I was there, Mike Kramer, who is the CEO of 420 Blockchain, came in because Augusta High Tech is his technology partner for his product.
Right.
And so we all ended up going to lunch and talking, and that project was, my part in it was winding down, and I was figuring out, well, what am I going to do next? And we started talking about what he was doing, and I was like, well, this is very fascinating. And we created a friendship and started talking about the different aspects of what he was doing and where he was going with it. And the technology was still being built. So the outward plans for revenue and for building the unique partnerships hadn't really started yet. And so we got to talking, and he said, "Hey, how would you like to come on board and work with me?" And I said that would be fantastic. So that's how I got introduced to blockchain. So it's funny how everything kind of comes full circle, and every little
Sure.
step that you make in life, even if it's up a mountain, sometimes, it will bring you back to your home.
So why are you passionate about blockchain and cannabis? I mean, you've now married the two together in this new career of yours.
Yeah, so for the last 6 weeks, I've been reading Blockchain for Dummies, and and I'm a pretty technically savvy person. I've self-taught myself many softwares, and when I built the online training platform, we looked at integrating all kinds of things to help users take information and bring it in. And when I started researching what was happening in the cannabis industry and why we were having the roadblocks to success, or more success, especially in the medical community, it really all surrounded the fact that the illegitimate or black market aspects of the cannabis industry are making it difficult for square or legal cannabis providers to get the ability to bank, for example. We all know that one of the major dangers in the cannabis industry, and as consumers, we know this too, is that these companies can't do anything with their money.
Right. It's an all cash business,
it's an
and they
all,
can't do anything
they're
with.
burying it in the ground.
They have to.
They're hiding it in the bunkers, and they're machine guns with big fences around their properties because looting and stealing, and it's like the wild, wild west, right?
Sure.
It was back in the day. And so until and unless there's a way to meaningfully track and have transparency and to show that these transactions that are taking place are legal between legal entities who are licensed and have the ability to provide services in this industry.
Well, legal on both the federal and state level.
Right. Well, there are Obama, I believe it was, created the Cole memo because they did understand that if we're going to be able to legalize it at a state level, we can't keep them from banking. Right?
Right.
Even though the problem with the federal level is that banks are federally insured through the FDIC, and so they are, they can't keep their
Prevented.
insurance. If they
Right.
want to have insurance and be a legal bank, they cannot be doing any illegal activity. None. So
As defined by the federal government.
as defined by the federal government, right? And so, and let's be honest, a lot of these dispensaries are doing illegal activity because people are coming in and they're buying it. They're not maybe even knowing they're doing illegal activity, but they're buying it from one dispensary and they're buying the max, and they're going to the next dispensary and they're buying the max, and they're going to the next dispensary and they're buying the max, and then they take it across state lines and sell it in a state where it's not legal. Now, the dispensary may not
That
know.
doesn't happen.
Never. But they may not know that's going on because there is no way to know that
There's no tracking.
John Q went to this one, and this one
Right.
before he got to me. They used to do this in the post office with money orders under a certain amount of money because
Right.
you didn't have to report it to the government. So people would take cash and they'd go from post office to post office to post office buying money orders, and then that was how they hid their cash. How would I know that? I have no idea. But it is true.
It's one of those urban myths.
It's an urban myth. So, so at any rate, until we can show the banks, and the banks actually can do business with in their states as long as they can prove that all the transactions are, it's just too risky for them. And they would not technically have to put somebody in the bank 24/7 with current process to be monitoring every activity that's going on in that dispensary. They would have to send somebody from the bank, and they're just not in that business. That's
Right.
not what they're going to do. So what I like about the blockchain is it really has the ability to do a couple of very important things. Number one, the government is going to want to regulate policies and procedures and to make sure that they're getting their taxation dollars. Let's be honest. They want the taxes. That's why they legalized it.
Sure.
And if they can't track every transaction, they're losing money. So that's one thing. And the sooner they can do that, the sooner we will have a federally legal system, which we want, especially for medical marijuana, for those of us who are passionate about that. The other thing is it's a dangerous environment for everybody when these companies can't bank. So with the transparency and the security and the limited permissions and the ways that you can allow auditors and bank officials to see the transactions and the smart contracts and the hyperledger, that allows for a banking system to come in and work with these companies in a manner that does not violate their insurance.
This is the dispensaries
Dispensaries specifically,
and growers.
and growers,
Right.
the licensed producers. We just left Canada. We were at a convention up there. Four of the biggest licensed producers in Canada were there, and they were sharing their plans because for those of us in America that don't know, Canada countrywide made medical marijuana legal, and in July of 2018 is
Recreationally or
medically
medical?
first,
Okay.
but in July of 2018 is also going to be
Oh,
recreationally
interesting.
legal
I didn't know.
throughout the entire country. So they're the first G20 country to make it legal countrywide. And so they're looking at now how to be efficient at tracking all of that and controlling all of that. And
Sure.
Canada's excellent at that, by the way. They are, even in the supplement industry, we would have a supplement here. If we wanted to bring it into Canada, half the time we'd have to reformulate it because they were so strict on, what they deemed as proper formulation. So they actually are very good. Canada Health is very good at ensuring the safety of products that are coming in and monitoring them and regulating them and making sure they meet
Right.
quality standards. So I'm excited about Canada's medical marijuana space, and it was interesting to see that.
Do you see any of that, their model being adopted by any of the states here?
I think it's a perfect model for every country to take a look at. I mean,
Mm.
we'll see how they do, but it's a perfect opportunity to see a country that is historically very good at these types of controls and see how they handle this new industry.
I would like to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, the Blockchain Academy. The Blockchain Academy is an educational training firm offering blockchain training for developers and stakeholders. The Blockchain Academy is currently offering the following live courses: Blockchain Security, Hyperledger Developer Workshop, and Ethereum Zero to D app. Visit the Blockchain Academy's website for course outlines and course dates. The Blockchain Academy's courses can be delivered as a company-specific training, tailor-made to fit your organizational needs, delivered both on-site and online. The Blockchain Academy's training is cost-effective, flexible, and can be conducted in a manner that best suits your organizational needs. To learn more about the Blockchain Academy, visit them at www.theblockchainacademy.com. Do they in Canada require the dispensaries to actually also be growers? I mean, that seems to be a very common requirement in the States when there's medical marijuana and the dispensaries. They have to grow a specific segment or percentage of their business so that there isn't these vast farms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure about the answer to that question, but what I will tell you is of the four companies that were in this conference, two of the CEOs of their company came from pharmaceutical companies. Their background and their history was in the pharmaceutical industry, and they're coming in and taking cannabis and treating it like they did in a clinical environment in a pharmaceutical firm. So I think we're going to see, I know some of these growers, to answer your questions, are actually selling directly to John Q. Public, and they're bypassing dispensaries altogether. But I don't believe they require the dispensaries to be growers. They just require them to use,
in Canada.
Yeah, to use a licensed producer for their supply chain.
So are they adopting blockchain up there?
Well, that's why we were there.
Okay.
And we are certainly hoping that they will. And what's important to know is that, the way that the current industry works is there are what's called ERPs or software companies. It's very similar. And I neglected to mention that throughout my health background, I at one point had been a partner in an electronic medical records company.
Sure.
And so I am very familiar with all of the things that went wrong in the medical records industry. And they're still going wrong.
So what are some of those things?
Well, you had this mandate come out where every physician, they wanted them all using medical records. Everybody was still using the old file system. And the government said, we can't have that. Too much fraud, too much error, too much, misuse of government-paid health funds. And it's time for us to, get up to snuff. And so they put a carrot and a stick program out where they gave physicians a 5-year period and said, we'll pay for it if you do it this year or this year. Well, it's going to diminish the amount that we'll pay for the longer you wait to do it.
So the sooner you adopt, the
more,
higher you
right,
get
the less you have
reimbursed.
to pay. You'll get the whole thing reimbursed if you do it right now, and a little bit less and a little bit less. And then if you don't do it, it was a carrot and a stick, by 5 years, then we're going to start penalizing your Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, 1% the first year, 2% the next year. And so But these doctors didn't want medical records. They really didn't. They didn't want to learn it. They didn't want to change the way they had been,
But wouldn't patient care improve if they maintained it? I mean, you would think that that would be a logical outcome.
So what happens internally and what happens in our brain sometimes are two separate things. What they logically should want and what they feel because of just the way that they have to do business. It slowed them down. I'll be honest. I watched and did integrations for physicians. I saw that medical records was coming. I said, if we're going to be a consultant, we need to understand and be a part of that world. So I saw the negative side. They didn't want Big Brother watching. You know,
Right.
there were a couple of different things. They need to hire new staff. It was a cost. It was a cost that was a lot higher than what the cost of the software was
Right.
from a business perspective. And then what happened was all these companies said, "Ooh, we want to get into this space. Let's write software and create." So hundreds and hundreds of EMR softwares popped up, and of course, you're always going to have your big five, McKesson and GE Health, and so none of them were talking to each other. You're a doctor and you had McKesson. I'm a doctor and I had Aquarius EMR. My record doesn't talk to your record. You could have this one little document that you could export and import, but it really didn't have all that much information on it. People weren't really carrying, how do you carry that around? It was a HIPAA violation. It was just a disconjointed system. I'm like, this is never going to work, but if not for patients.
Right.
I want to be able to walk into one doctor and they have my whole medical record. I go into another one and they have my whole everything's there. What my specialist did with me, the testing that I got done, with the radiologist said, I want all of it there. I don't want them guessing. I don't
would
want
think
to
the insurance companies would want to actually enforce that.
Well, the blockchain really is the answer for that. It's almost like our record should be our record. That's what I think. I think they did it backwards. We should walk in with our record and they should plug into our stuff and just every doctor should dump it into and they can access our record. But we'll see. Maybe they will fix that. But what I was really excited about in the 420 world for the cannabis industry is we can take all of those existing ERPs that are out there. There's a couple of the major ones that are handling the transactional, they're calling it seed to sale software, and they can all use our information highway on the blockchain. So we're more of a support partner, not a competition to the existing POS and ERP systems that are out there today. We would love to partner with
So you're
them.
really an infrastructure play.
We're an infrastructure. I was saying the other day, I'm like, we're like the information highway, which is what they called the internet when
Right.
it came out. It's like a secondary or a sub-internet system almost,
Right.
where open APIs allow and special permissions and security and cryptography and all that stuff that you probably know a lot more about than I do, provides the vehicle for everybody to be able to communicate together and for all of that data to be able to be assimilated in one place and shared meaningfully, whether it's research on the different strains and how doctors are using it and what patients' reactions have been to that. I mean, that's a whole one database. And then the other database is it legal? Is it transactionally happening the way it's supposed to? Are the policies and procedures happening? Do the auditors and the bankers, can they make sure that a business is legitimate and that they're following all the necessary rules?
So who's adopting this?
Well, we hope everyone. We were at the conference in Canada. We're a United States company, obviously, but when we saw what was going on in Canada, we thought this was a really good opportunity to start with a country that's willing to be united. And the interesting thing that we heard when we were at the conference is that the licensed producers that are there, based on the amount of cannabis growth that they're anticipating, based on medical conditions, based on how many people are current.
What is the growth projections they're making?
Lots and lots and lots of people coming on board. Right now, there's about 300,000 patients that are currently prescribed
In Canada.
It was at 180,000. Now it's 300,000. I think the
So
number
a 50% increase, more than a 50%
in
increase.
like months, like 6 months,
Wow.
not even. And the recreational use in Canada, I mean, they're looking at it to be a $5 to $8 billion a year business. So I forget how many, I think it's 900,000 people. They're looking at having marijuana by the time we
That's
get.
almost 5% of their population.
That's right. And it's actually 42% of their population that is in support and or already recreationally using it illegally and or would be interested in using it medically. So it's almost a 40% of their population opportunity, right? That's who knows if that's going to take 2 years, 5 years, or 3 years. I mean, we don't know.
Right.
But the amount of producers in Canada right now, there's more demand than there is supply. So they're not really they're not fighting with each other. They're very in Canada, I hate to be Pollyanna, but they're kind of all like, let's just get along and help each other. And that was evident at the conference that we were at. And so
Well, it's because there's enough opportunity
there's
for everybody.
plenty of work for everybody. And
So no one has to actually be,
that's
like
right.
at some point
That's right.
when the market stops growing, and then they'll become very, very, business oriented, and it'll be their elbows will sharpen.
That's right. So we hope to partner with the Canadian government. We hope to partner with Canadian Health. We hope to partner with Ample Organics, which is the largest DRP that most of these producers and dispensaries are currently using to track and manage daily activity, and the growers themselves.
So your blockchain actually then covers it, as you said, from the seed to sale.
Correct.
So how are the growers going to actually engage with the blockchain? And what's the incentive for them to actually be a part of the 420 blockchain?
The incentive for them is increased legitimacy, to be able to provide and to prove to any of the government agencies that they're looking at. They're looking at getting funding for further research, to be able to take that research and put it into a database that everybody can share, to be able to further support the legalization and the rollout of medical cannabis. Here's the interesting thing about Canada. These growers are not just looking at the Canadian market, even though there's more demand than there is supply. They're also looking at Australia. They can export Canada. They can export to the EU. They can export to Australia. Germany is looking to buy cannabis from Canada. Australia is a big one that's looking to buy cannabis. So they're actually even exporting, which would, just further, hey, we're the best. We're on the block. We're on the blockchain. That's what I say. We're sharing information.
Sure.
We're supporting the industry's, unification and proper research and medical application. I mean, many of the people, Invictus MD was another one of the companies, Aurora and Emerald and T-God, which is the organic version of marijuana. They were all very passionate about taking research on things like Alzheimer's or, opiate type pain disorders that we could really make an impact on quality of life and minimize the negative effects of some of these more dangerous drugs or more debilitating diseases. So they're excited. They came from a medical environment. They want to see the actual clinical use expanded. And
so how's that going to be reported in your blockchain?
Well, now you're going to ask me a technical question that
Okay,
I
we'll
don't
skip that
really understand the answer to. We could get our chief technology officer over here. We could do another interview, and he will go all into that. Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, it has to do with AI. It has to do
Of
with
course.
with big data and taking that data and analyzing that data. And I don't know exactly how they do it, but
Well, that's one of the reasons why, your website actually says that you've partnered with IBM
That's
and
right.
their Hyperledger.
that's right.
So using Watson actually as the AI
It's one
would
of them.
be
Mhm.
a very good integration.
Yep.
While we talked about the seed aspect, the growers, how is it going to work for the dispensaries? Are they going to have a POS that actually ports in, uses an API
Yeah.
into your blockchain?
Correct. So anybody that's on the blockchain will be able to see the purchase for that consumer, right? So that example that we gave earlier, John Q goes to one, and then he goes to another, and then he goes to another. With all dispensaries being on a blockchain, that won't happen.
Unified blockchain.
Unified blockchain. That's right.
Right.
That's right. It would need everybody to be on it to be 100%
Right.
efficient.
And then it wouldn't matter what POS they used.
Wouldn't matter what POS because they're plugging into the information highway. If you think about, well, banks did a great job at this. The banks, when they were trying to eliminate fraud many years ago, they got real time. You get a fraud alert on your phone now like that if somebody's used your card, or even somewhat suspiciously, right? So the banks did a great job.
Even when we ourselves use our card.
Even we ourselves, yeah. If you're traveling in somewhere and they're like, "Oh, you're not normally in Canada. What's going on over here?" "Oh, yeah, we're here. I'm here. I got to call them." But they got
Now
system in place.
that's a good discussion to have with your credit card company.
Yeah.
Yes, I am in Canada, but it's a cannabis conference.
They love that. They love
Oh,
that.
okay, sure, we'll approve that. Yeah.
Right, right. No problem. But yeah, so it's really more about providing, like I said, that information highway, that one place where every transaction is secured and documented, and the contracts are consensusly agreed upon, and the government regulators can see, so that if I go to one dispensary and I buy the max, I'm not allowed to go to another dispensary. They go, oh, nope, you can't buy. You've already bought in your max for, I forget how long it takes before you can go back in and buy another amount, but you'd be locked out. You
Are
can
you
only
gonna
buy
have
what you can buy.
an API so the banks can actually
Yes,
manage these transactions?
that's right.
So, have you created a use case so far? And like, who's been the participants in this use case? And what was the size of that sample that you've actually created?
Yeah, they're working on 2 use cases right now. One, well, not particularly with one person, but with some growers out in California, and then also with a research company, a medical research company. So I'm not right now overseeing those, and I know they're midway, so we could probably talk more intelligently about that next time we get together if we do. But I know what they're finding is that most of the people in the industry are extremely excited about the fact that they can legitimize what they're doing. One of their biggest concerns is that, and for the medical research, they're just like, this is fantastic. If we can get everybody's research
Sure, a transparent,
transparent
single source,
and going
right?
in, and but from the legitimacy side, the people that are actually in marijuana that are business people that are legitimately doing their business, they're being hurt by the people that are illegitimately doing their business. It's hindering their growth, their ability. So they're all excited that there is a way, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, because without the blockchain, I mean, they don't know how to fix the problem.
So while you're building this infrastructure, who are you working with to create the APIs for the POSs and for the input from the growers, and how is it going to be, the actual logistics of getting it from farm to dispensary?
That's right. And transportation. That
Right.
will be integrated in there as well, which is another big problem, which, we didn't talk about. So we have Augusta High Tech has a team of 150 coders here in the United States and in India. And they've been building APIs and using Hyperledger and IBM Watson in many healthcare environments for a while. So they're very good at what they do. And I'm not going to pretend to know how they write their open APIs and what they
Right.
do, but I know that part of the process is we speak with their team, whoever's handling their technology. We give them the sheet with, here's what you do, here's what you can have permissions to, and here's how you tie into the blockchain, and here's your secure password, or however that works. And then the 2 technology people from each company go in and do the data mapping, or however
Right.
however they need to set that up to give limited permissions for certain information to more general everyone, and then the other information that can come in can be specifically for them.
Have you had any dialogue with the banks and, more importantly, with the government agencies that are trying to collect taxes on it?
We're working on speaking with the Canadian government right now. It was part of the reason for going up to Canada. It's important to probably let you know that the technology was just finished being built about a month ago. So we're a new
It's
company.
shiny and new.
It's shiny and new, which is great because we're getting a lot of attention, but we haven't had a lot of time to answer some of those questions quite yet. But the answer to that is we are meeting with some of the regulators in Canada. We're working on meeting with some of the banks, and there's actually a specific gentleman who now all he does is try to find banks that will work with marijuana companies. So I have an email going out to him where I'd like to sit down, meet with him. He's out in California, and talk with him about how this can help his mission. So we're taking those steps now. That's part of my job description, is to get to those decision makers and let them know the solution that we have, and see how they react. We're
So,
hoping they react well.
do you think that the blockchain will help legitimize cannabis?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the banking aspect of it is the lowest hanging fruit, and what I mean by that is it's the biggest problem. Um,
Well,
it's
for the dispensaries, for sure.
and the government. I mean, the fact
Well,
that
the government, I don't know if the government really has that big of a problem, simply because they have the ability to go in and audit them, which
Right.
is true.
Right.
And how is it any different than whether your product is, widgets or actual cannabis? There's a transaction. If they're not collecting the tax or they're not paying the tax, the government is going to come in and say, okay, show me what your records are.
Right.
There isn't necessarily an audit trail
Right.
that is uniform and actually transparent, but it is there.
Right. Yes, it's laborious and human controlled. Yeah. But I was actually thinking more along the lines of their responsibility to protect the public because having cash,
The government or
yes,
the
the government.
okay,
So from a government standpoint, when you have all these businesses carrying around all these cash and toting guns and putting blockades up and it's not a safe environment. It's not. And
yes, there's potential for danger.
potential for high danger, right? And so by not allowing marijuana businesses to bank, which I understand, we all understand, we talked about that, it creates precarious situations for the community
Right,
around that area and the people that are trying to provide a legitimate and beneficial service to patients, right?
right.
And or the public. So it is their responsibility to help this. That's why Obama put out the Cole memo saying, hey, you banks, here's the rules, but you need to start working with these companies. We can't have all this cash. So for me, I think that it's a no-brainer to say if a cannabis company is on the blockchain and their grower is on the blockchain and their transportation company is on the blockchain and we can track seed to sale, we know there's every transaction that's coming into this dispensary is checked against the blockchain and we can prove legitimacy and give that bank transparency because they can't put somebody in that dispensary 24/7 and monitor, but if they can monitor from access to the blockchain, why and let's be totally honest, you think these banks don't want that money?
Of course they do.
Of course they want that money. I mean, they would love to have that money funneling through their bank, but it's too much of a risk to reward ratio. So now we just even the playing field, lower the risk and heighten the reward. Why would they not want that?
So what is the revenue model?
It's a good question. We have a couple different aspects, and we've really been kicking around free access to the blockchain. Just give everybody access and don't charge them. That's one revenue model. I know that sounds crazy.
That isn't a revenue model. That's a free access.
Well, if you look at a lot of companies, they start with free and then they find a way to charge, right?
Right.
So there's that, which
Well, if you built your own point of sale systems, you would actually sell that and still have then everything else.
we've
You
looked
would
at
have
that.
the
Yeah,
infrastructure as the free aspect, and then all the ports of entry,
right.
those oracles would actually be something you would charge for.
Exactly. But the other thing is, you know, data is the future, and data is how all these companies are being valuated. Like right now, Facebook's valuation is $250 per user, and they have 2 billion users, and that's how they're valuated, right? They also have their revenue model from advertising, but they have a data valuation. So if you think about every transaction in the cannabis industry running through the blockchain, each user's data is going to have a valuation. So we'll have a data value. In addition to that, we have a mobile application that is called 420 Off the Chain.
420 off the chain.
Off the Chain. And that is a consumer,
How is it off the chain?
because it's connected to the blockchain. So the app,
Oh, off the chain, but it's connected to the blockchain.
right, it's just a
Okay.
kind of a fun
It's a play on
play
words.
on words. It's off the chain,
Right.
because if something's off the chain, it means it's crazy good, right?
Right.
This is off the chain, kind of a thing. So, but it actually is connected to the chain. So it's consumer facing, and it would have all of our blockchain dispensaries would have like geo-target, it has geo-fencing, it has dynamic campaign management. You can play videos, you can educate, you can do market research, you can do patient research. So let's say,
Well, on that patient research, how is your blockchain going to actually help those researchers? I mean, you're going to be able to track actually the growing, delivery, and sale of cannabis,
Mhm.
but how is that actually going to help researchers say, you know what, there is a value in terms of solving this problem, or we can lower opioid use by the use of this, and this is how that's working.
right,
So are you building out an aspect for the medical research part where
yes.
there's going to be like patient care and all of that tracked
Yeah,
in?
we're working with a couple of different potential research companies, and inside this app has a smart technology that has the ability to profile and have people set their parameters of what information they want to hear or what information they want to be a part of or what data, and then it sends them notifications in app. So let's say you were prescribed green crack for your anxiety. Okay, green crack is the name of a marijuana that I guess is very popular in the United States. And so you can go into your app and it says, hey, we understand that you were taking marijuana for medical purposes. Would you like to share your results and help others get better understanding of which strains, so they can go in and have de-identified data so it won't come in as their name. They can participate in a research that says, what were you prescribed it for? How much were you taking on a daily basis? How did it make you feel? Did you feel better? Did you have less anxiety? Did you have more anxiety? Did you take it before you went to bed at night? Did you take it in the morning? How frequently do you need to take it in order for it to abate your symptoms? There's different, depending on the disorder, depending on the issue.
Sure.
What strain was it? If we know what strain it was, because we already have their information, we know what they purchased because it's off the chain, right? They've already gone into a dispensary and their ID shows they purchased X amount of green crack, which is this strain, because that's the new thing. And at Emerald Health, their chief executive officer, Bing Hong, was talking about they're doing a lot of genetic testing on different strains and which strains are better than others for what purposes. So it's going to become very strain oriented, right? So if we know what strain they bought and what their amount they bought, and they can tell us, oh yeah, I'm taking it twice a day or 3 times a day. Yeah, I don't have any anxiety anymore. Or man, first time I took that, I had so much anxiety I couldn't, well, maybe there should have been taking a different strain or a different type altogether.
Right. What is your thoughts about the adoption by the industry over, say, the next 1 year, or 3 years, or 5 years?
My thoughts on the adoption, I think that
I mean, you've spoken a lot about the Canadian environment. Hopefully that will work out, and you've actually given us that. But let's talk about the U.S. adoption.
Yeah.
Are you going to try to be focusing it on the individual states, and how's that going to work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we definitely are going to focus by state just for the reasons that the way that the industry is currently set up here, you almost have to, right? Because each state is its own regulating body or governing body or decision-making body. And so I was watching an interview with the gentleman that's in charge of the Arkansas rollout. And actually, it was funny because his main concern was banking. He's like, I don't want to be like these other states where,
it's a disaster.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. So he's first on my list. I'll be giving him a call and saying, hey, let's talk, because I think we can work with your banks. And if the regulators, my answer to your question is that we believe we go to the government or the regulators or the banks, right? Those 3 entities, and say, if you had this, could you see this going a little bit better? Could you be able to do business if you're a bank? Would you be able to manage this industry? Would you be able to make sure you're getting the taxation dollars that you should be getting and eliminating black market activity or minimizing it greatly? Then they would mandate whoever has to get a license has to be on the chain. That's how I see it going as far as adoption. But I don't think that will be perceived negatively by the industry. Hopefully they'll understand the purpose and the plan, the bigger plan behind blockchain is not to just be a policeman, although it needs to be a police. It's going to be a policeman regardless, right?
Right.
But it's more about taking vast amount of information, utilizing it in positive ways, creating a secure environment where certain permissions can be given to certain people so that needs can be met, while other information can be brought in and used meaningfully for patients and consumers.
Now, you shared with us the story of how you actually met the owner of the 420 blockchain and how he brought you into it. What was his story? What's his background story with regards to him saying one day, you know what, I actually need to create this blockchain?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Like Michael Kramer came from the financial services industry. So he was in commercial lending and has been in the finance world for a long time. He was also in law enforcement for 12 years in Pennsylvania and 10 in Pennsylvania and 2 in Florida. And I guess I forget. I'd have to ask him the actual story of how he and Sean Caputo, who is the chief digital strategist and VP of Augusta High Tech, got put together. But somehow he had an idea for helping the marijuana industry, and he was introduced to Sean, and the two of them had a few lengthy discussions and designed and built, the plans for blockchain and the mobile app. And I came in after all that transpired, so I can't really give good juicy details about it. But all I know is that he is very passionate about the medical app. We've both talked extensively. When we met, I talked about my son, and
Sure.
we talked about what had happened with him. And he was very passionate about the proper use, the good applications that can come out of a healthy cannabis industry, right? Integrated with medical and research and data. And so I know he's passionate about just minimizing the wild, wild west, having been a police officer and having had to deal with that from a different aspect.
Right.
And then also understanding the financial side of the house with commercial lending and knowing that banks can't, why that complicated that problem or how that created that problem, and looking for a way to overcome that.
Where do you see the cannabis industry going in terms of its legalization around the country?
It's interesting. We've had a lot of discussions with some people that are very well versed in policy and government, and there are those that believe, and this is just purely speculation on my part, please don't take this home to the bank and whatever, but we've heard that
We're memorializing it. permanently.
memorializing it, Trump, please don't get mad at me. We actually heard that they believe that if Trump does get elected in a second term, that he will most likely legalize it federally.
Oh,
That's the
an
belief.
interesting.
From a few people.
Right.
And not that he said that, but just based on, his business mind and some of the things that he's currently done and how beneficial a federal legalization of at least medical marijuana could be for this country, right? Financially and medically, and, it's happening anyway, right? Everybody's out there, let's be honest.
Right.
Marijuana exists. Right? It's not like
Only in a few small towns.
only in a town. Yeah, right. Okay. I think it's like 65% of the population has either tried marijuana or uses it on a regular basis, right? So it's there, right? It's not like we're all introducing something that doesn't exist. We're just
Right.
taking something that exists and taking it out of the dark ages and actually into application. And there's a lot of people that believe that the pharmaceutical companies have fought this marijuana for many years because they don't want it competing with their drugs, right?
Well, I've always been surprised that they have not been the proponent of actually taking it over.
They so this is my other part to your
Because
answer.
you would look at it and you would go, okay, this is something that is important for them to actually monetize.
Right.
And they could actually do it at a level that the mom and pops can't even compete with.
Well, the reason why they haven't is because you cannot patent an herb.
I don't know. The tobacco companies have done a pretty good job in terms of
So that's
not
interesting.
patenting it, but
Yes.
they've actually created, a branding. And,
That's right. So the next step, the other part of that conversation that I had was that they believe that it is Philip Morris, it is
well, they become
pharmaceutical
the growers.
pharmaceutical companies and Walmart that are
Walmart.
are going to want to own this industry, right?
Ah.
Through distribution.
Well, that's Walmart.
And Philip Morris already has distribution.
That's true too.
And then the pharmaceutical companies have the
Creative purity.
right. And so they believe that these companies that are setting themselves up as cannabis growers or dispensaries are all just waiting for those other big companies to come and buy them. They're building it
Interesting.
and creating it because it's going to be who's put it together so we can just buy.
Right.
buy.
Well,
buy.
anytime there's a fragmented market,
Mhm.
a dominant player wants to come in and then dominate it. So
Right.
that's a very common
Right.
business model that exists. So how is your son doing?
My son is doing better. Actually, he about 4 months ago was put on 2 new medications in tandem and actually went about 2.5 months without having a seizure, which is kind of long for him. and then missed a medication and had a seizure.
Oh,
So
wow.
we were devastated because he, of course, is 18 and he'd like to be seizure-free for a year so he can drive and have
Right.
somewhat of a normal life and get a job and do those types of things that young adults want to do. But the good news was we felt like maybe this is a sign that the medication is working, right?
Oh,
So
right.
he's back on, the medication. I think it's been another 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we seem to be doing good. But thank you for asking.
Well, it's a great story for, the start and introduction into what you're actually doing now. I actually want to thank you, Heather, for showing up here at Blockchain 360.
My
And
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
For those of you who are interested in following me, I am going to be speaking in Milan on blockchain on October 12th and 13th. The following week, I'll be in Mexico City at the Mass Challenge. And then the week after that, I'll be at the World Blockchain Summit in Dubai. Thank you again for listening to Blockchain 360.
The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly. Have a question? Want us to interview someone specific? Wish to hear about a particular topic? Let us know. You can email podcast@blockchain360.co or tweet us on Twitter @blockchain360 or at our website blockchain360.co.